Jonas, welcome back.
Thank you very much for having me again.
Excited. I feel like I chat to you more than I chat to some of my family.
Yeah, it's becoming quite regular this now.
It is. It is. Okay, great topic. Obviously, we're going to have a big turnout for this year. We've got over 400 people have signed up. I'm sure there'll be a couple of late ones coming in, but yeah, we look at game models and we automatically associate it with the senior game and the professional game, and your work has kind of reverse engineered that there to the youth side, and that's what you're going to cover today.
Yeah, it's something that it's really important regardless of where you work and what level you work on as well. So we've looked at trying to make that holistic plan for a youth team, a senior team. Doesn't really matter, it can be applied at all levels. So as Gary said, what we'll look at today is basically what is a game model, because it's been kind of a buzzword like philosophy, game model. We need to define what it means. We need to discover and sort of agree on that shared definition of it before it makes sense to move on. And then we will look at how do you start to develop one? Where do you start? Do you start with 4-3-3? Do you start with exercises? So a game model is a set of principles to guide behavior. This is quite vague and it doesn't necessarily mean a lot for us as football coaches. So there's some questions that will be answered throughout this webinar, because it's important that we start from the right place about the game model. And when we start to develop one, the typical first thing to do is to go on YouTube and look at Barcelona style of play or Jurgen Klopp high pressing, and then try to just force that onto your team, which often is not the best approach. So if you want to develop your own game model, you can follow these steps. It has to start with who you are or who you want to be as a club, as a team, as a group. And then that is your values, that's your culture, that's the traits characterizing you as a team or a group. And then based off the identity comes the playing principles and the sort of structures of play, key situations that comes in the game model. Once we've got the game model, we can create a curriculum, which is what do people need to learn to practice our identity and implement our game model. And then it's the methodology, which is the fourth step. The methodology refers to how we teach the first 3 points. How do we implement it? What's our coach behaviors? What sort of learning activities do we design? And then it's the periodization at the end. We will not speak a lot about it today, but it's generally how you plan learning activities into a season, into a month, into a week, or into a cycle between games. So you can do the periodization yourself based on the first 4 points there. So all of this will be based around my fictional club, Munkvold FC. It's not a real club, it doesn't exist, but this is for one of our fictional youth teams. These are our values. We are productively paranoid. We train to get better than we were yesterday every single day. It's important for us to have that paranoia about the work we do. And we believe that if we work together, we can achieve greatness, because 11 people playing together will beat any 11 players just be playing at the same time. And we believe that good enough never is. We always have to raise the standard. And if the people who are with us don't buy into any of these values, then we need to reconsider. Which brings us to the next point, which goes on who we want into our culture. And there's a metaphor by Jim Collins, which sums it up really well. It's about getting the right people on the bus in the right seats and then getting everyone else up. And this is the same whether you work with a professional team or if you work with a youth team or if it's about your staff or if it's the players. Having the right people in the right seats, setting the right examples and really pushing our values, our identity, that's what will help us get as far as we can. So that leads us to the next point. We know what sort of characteristics define our right people, but that's very general. We have to be more specific. We need to know what qualities we look for in our players, and we need to know what qualities to develop in our players. And these 3 pointers will define everything in the work that we do later on. This is the starting point. So our first trait is a need to win mentality. And then we have some pointers about how it's developed, which type of players we can find it in, and how we can really nurture this within our players group. I will go quite fast through my 3 traits here because the purpose of this is not for any other coaches to replicate or copy this, but to understand the template and then be able to make their own traits and then think about how they can develop this. So the reason why I've chosen these 3 is because I think that if we love these 3 traits and we take them with us into every practice, into every game, into every learning interaction, then we will find the ultimate 1v1 player. We will develop the ultimate 1v1 player. Because in training, they will be surrounded by people who are competitive, adaptable, and who are good at winning the ball. So they will develop these abilities, but also the ability to stay on the ball against really good players. And they will develop that creative, playful dribbling ability, which will help them retain the ball in really tough situations, as well as outplay their direct opponents. Based on this, our game idea looks around outplaying the opposition in order to create superiority. So we want to look for and exploit moments of superiority. This is done by outplaying the opposition. Superiority is a concept taken from positional play, where you can outplay, where you can create imbalance by being better, by passing into or receiving in a better place or space, or by overloading an area, creating a 2v1, 3v2, etc. And then outplaying refers to a moment where you exploited one of these superiorities by taking the ball past the player or into a better space. I'll show you some examples of this now. Now I need to figure out how to stop sharing my screen. So this is an example of Man City looking for superiority. You can see them moving the ball really quite fast, quite well. They're trying to change the tempo at times, look around the ball, a lot of movement, trying to get a positional superiority or a numerical superiority. In this instance, they're almost make it. In this situation, they will make it, but they have to work it and probe for quite a long time before getting there. Now look, on their own half, it's mostly about creating a positional or numerical superiority. But as soon as they get into the opposition half, then they will start looking more into the qualitative superiority, which you know that stopped a little bit too soon. Raheem Sterling would get the ball there and dribble at the fullback and create that 1v1 where he is trying to show off his qualitative superiority. Outplaying is a different concept. I hope you can see the video here now. If you look at Mbappe throughout from the start of this video, look here how he prepares to outplay by scanning and getting his body shape right. He's outplayed one player, he draws the pressure from the centre back there and outplays him. Yeah, so here's an example of pressure from behind, receiving an aerial ball, outplay. Centre midfield, you don't necessarily have to dribble to outplay the opposition, but you can do it through clever touches, receiving with the disguise, or smart passes, like you saw in the videos there. Now I need to share my screen again. Let's see. With technology, it's very difficult for me to see whether this is how this is looking on your laptops, but hopefully it's so far so good. So
it's good, Jonas, all good.
Good, thank you. It's nice with that confirmation when you're just talking to your laptop. So based on this game idea, we have developed and created these sort of phases of play. It's all about creating that imbalance when we have the ball, because then it will be easier for us to create chances, create goals. Out of possession, it's all about regaining balance, taking the ball back, doing something good with it. I'll show you some examples now from offensively when the opposition is in balance and we're trying to create imbalance using some of the principles that you can see on the screen here. But then we will lose the ball, and I'll show you some of the principles in the transition to defense. So here you can see the opposition is balanced. It's difficult for us to progress. And we have some collective principles. We want to make the pitch big, wide, and long so that we can try to have more space between their lines, between their players, to create superiorities there. And now remember, we can create an imbalance by either of these superiorities. So we know that our number 6 and our number 8, they have a positional superiority because of their positioning behind an opposition line or behind or in a pocket of space. We think that the center back might have a qualitative superiority against their striker, but we don't really know because these are all dots instead of real players. And we know that he can set up a numerical superiority with a fullback. If none of these are possible, then we would like to switch the play to number 5, number 3, and try again from a different angle. So in every moment of play, we have offensive interests and defensive interests. Regardless of where the ball is, our players need to have these two concepts, these two thoughts in their head at the same time. In this situation, the offensive interests that we've developed is we want to play through if we can. If it's not possible, we want to switch the point of attack. And the defensive interests is to prepare in case we lose the ball. This involves being compact behind the ball. So if the pass now goes to number 6, then number 3, 4, and 5 will go a little bit more compact to protect that space in case we lose the ball. And protect is a little bit of the same, but also with a communication to the players in front to make sure that everyone will be in position to counter press quickly if we should lose the ball. As it so happens, our number 6 plays a poor pass to their number 8 and we lose the ball. And this is one of the most interesting phases of play in life of youth football, because 1v1s will happen so frequently here. But it's about how we nurture it and how we facilitate for it. So the basic principle for my team is that everyone has to find and compete in their individual duel. So that will look something like this. And now we have 1v1s more or less everywhere. Purpose of this is to make our players, put them in quite difficult situations. We know that by doing this, there will be more challenging 1v1s. Sometimes it can be more risky. We'll probably concede more goals, at least in the beginning, by doing this rather than just dropping off. But we believe that through just the repetition of this, our players will develop that ball winning ability and ball winning mentality that we spoke of earlier. So the first priority in this phase is to regain the ball by competing in your individual duel. And then if the 6 goes to press and it goes terribly wrong, then we have to drop off with all team and regain our balance. But first priority, win the ball. Now we'll speak a little bit about how we work to practice our identity and to implement our game model. And it involves starting with the end in mind. Starting by analyzing the best players in each position and their traits and abilities and their key performance indicators. So we'll look at a fullback in this example, and then we will link the best practice to our identity, our game, tailor it to what we want, and create player profiles and positional profiles linked to the very best in the professional game. So this is how a fullback profile can look. Andy Robertson, at least one of the best in the world. Attacking characteristics, defensive characteristics, physical characteristics, and the 3 key performance indicators is preventing or blocking crosses, critical involvement out of possession, success and fail, and critical involvement in possession, success and fail. By analyzing a player at the Champions League level and getting numbers for this, we can compare these with a player at our under 19s, under 16s, under 14s, and then we can say that quite simply, player A is better than player B because they do these things more often or more successfully. and then we can objectify their development goals a little bit better. So each player will have a player profile like this. There they will have a score or a rating on their traits. Ball winner, adaptable, need to win. It goes from 1 to 10, where 1 is weakest in the group and making little progress, and 10 is the national top level. Obviously, the references here has to be developed, has to be suited to your group. So national top level might not be relevant, and weakest in group and making little progress might be a bit savage. So you might want to rephrase or change that to suit your group. And then there are some aspects of the football mentality, coachability, how they self-regulate, taking responsibility for own performance, and how they deal with new context, tough periods, stuff like this. This is really relevant, as well as the football motor skills, but it's something that coaches generally spend too little time on analyzing with their players. And then that's page 1. Page 2, we move on to the position-specific requirements. So as a fullback, how well do they deal with threats to the box? How well do they deal with scoring or helping to the team create goals? How well do they create the imbalance? How well do they regain balance out of possession? And then you get this radar chart here where the player and the coach, both of their perceptions are visible at the same time. And that's a really, really useful conversation starter for a player conversation or a one-to-one talk with a player. If the coach has has rated him as 6, but he has given himself the score of 10, or the other way around, that's a really useful way to start a conversation, because the coach can ask, okay, I see you have rated yourself as 10. Could you sort of elaborate what you were thinking? What sort of situations did you think of? And that's something which can be really fruitful, because it can help the player and the coach go closer together and have that shared understanding of where the player is now and how far away they are from their long-term goal or short-term goal. So the curriculum, which is typically sort of tactical, technical, physical, cognitive. A lot of clubs, a lot of coaches have an idea of the tactical, technical side of football. The physical at youth level mostly maybe takes care of itself by playing football on smaller and bigger pitches. But coaches know a little bit about that as well. But the cognitive and the mental side of it is something which you have to find space for in your curriculum, because this is what separates the really top players from the players who almost make it. And there's some research by Norwegian professor Jonas, which has found the following 11 traits are characteristic of elite players. So we can say, in many cases, these traits will give the player better chances of becoming elite. And it has very little to do with technical, tactical, or physical ability, but it's about how well they deal with different situations. And as coaches, as clubs, we need to provide opportunities for our players to learn this, and we need to help them experience repetition of this, and we need to help them sort of cope with it as well. So if a player is struggling and they're going through a tough time, we need to help them develop the mechanisms, the tools to maybe find their shape again, find their form, and start performing well again. But it starts with us as coaches taking the responsibility to educate ourselves. Regardless, that was a little bit of a digression. This is one of the technical. This is one of the technical elements of our curriculum, which is how the players prepare to outplay. So the moments before they can outplay, what do they do? What do the best in the world do differently? And how can we learn from them and take it down to our level? And it's simple. It's about what they see. It's about how they position themselves, and it's about their body shape. And if they do these things right, then they're in a much better position to outplay their opponents once that situation happens, once that situation occurs. I'll show 2 videos now as well about Kylian Mbappe. It's the same as one before, but longer, so you get more of them. He will impress us a little bit more because he's an excellent player. And while we're watching the Mbappe clip, consider this piece of statistic. From that international tournament where this is taken, Mbappe scanned more than twice as much as the average Premier League striker inside the opposition penalty box. So we talk a lot about his physical, technical ability, but look at the way he moves his head throughout the entire clip, and you will be really impressed. And then we have Alexis Sanchez on the other hand, and I don't think you will be as impressed with it. I'll just stop sharing my screen. Play video. Good. Hopefully you see the video now. See, he's already scanned. His body shape was good. Now between the touches, he's scanning again. Look how many times he looks away from the ball. Look at how many scans he does, and then he pulls off that brilliant piece of technique, decision making, because of how well he's collected that information from his surroundings. We will see it from another angle if it stops loading. Yeah, so here you see the entire situation from a higher perspective. Try to watch what he does with his head again. Is this buffering just for me? Who knows?
Yeah, I think it's playing for everyone else. Jonas, is good.
Oh, is it? Okay. Maybe it's my connection then. So we saw Mbappe there, and what he does is really, really impressive. This is what will probably make him one of the best players in the world in quite a short time. Now, if you look at Alexis Sanchez, who's playing striker for Arsenal here in this clip, and he not once does he look away from the ball, and he gives away the ball in a bad situation, and it almost leads to a goal conceded. So these two videos, they really just exemplify and illustrate how important it is to look away from the ball at the right time and look for the right things. And Mbappe does that really, really well, both in this clip and most of the time otherwise. Sanchez, especially in this clip, does a really, really bad job at that. Good. Good. So the last part of this is looking at creating a framework which lets us evaluate and reflect on the things that we do. Some things are too important to leave to chance, therefore we create checklists to make sure that we always remain true to our identity and our game. We always train in a manner which lets us play our game a little bit better. And we develop the player traits and characteristics in our identity and in our game. So in order to make sure that what we do today and yesterday are sort of getting us nearer our ultimate aim, we have checklists for trainings, and we have questions which are along the lines of, is the session teaching good habits in terms of prepare to outplay and 1v1s? These are important moments for us. Therefore, we need to make sure that every session, no matter what the tactical topic is helping to develop those good habits. Before the training, are the players made ready to train at the required intensity? This goes to their brains and the muscles. Are they warmed up properly? Are they given enough information about the tactical topic? Are they thinking about the topic before they arrive to training? What kind of stuff do we do to make them start thinking and start reflecting and start visualizing already before they arrive to training, or at least before they start warm-up? And then there are other things like about the players' welfare and their development. For instance, can players stay behind and practice or talk to each other or talk to coaches after training? Are we as coaches available to the players? And then we can use a checklist like this for every microcycle, so every week, every month. We can evaluate a season, asking questions like, in trainings, did our players get to love and explore their game? Did our players experience defeats and wins? Did we see and speak with every single player? And then by following a checklist like this, by asking these kind of questions, we will be able to understand our players a little bit more. They will understand us. And then we can go back to the beginning, to our identity or to our game model, and we can make the changes that have to be made in order to make it an even better framework or a document for our players. And by using these sort of frameworks for reflection and evaluation, we can ensure that what we do today will get us closer to our ultimate goal. All the content I've shown you today is based on the game model project, and I've not shown all of it because I was told to not take everyone's full evening. or day, regardless of where you are. So hopefully this has been interesting. I think we can do some questions, Gary.
Absolutely outstanding. Jonas, love that.
Mm.
Can you hear me? Hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're way too modest about the game model package. I've put it up. There's been a massive response to it with coaches ordering it. I'm going to share my screen real quick, and hopefully you don't mind me doing this. Where it's this is. Can you see it? You can see your.
I can see you.
You can. Oh, it hasn't shared yet. Screen on. Okay. Can you see my screen?
No, I can still just see you.
My game model. Okay. Let me work on that there. I will. I'll pull it up. I'll take a question. I'll let you answer it, and then I'll upload it on this here. Eric has asked, how do you alter / emphasize certain aspects of your game model based on opponent or individual opposing players?
I wouldn't change any of this, especially not at a youth level. I would, at a sort of senior level, you make a game plan sort of based on your game model, which also takes into consideration the opposition. So, for instance, if you in your game model have 2 ways of high press, sometimes you need wide, sometimes you need inside, then you can choose one of these for your opposition, depending on where their best players are. But you wouldn't make any changes to this document and this way of working for one opposition, one game, because it's all about who you are, who you want to be, and then reflecting that when you come onto the pitch. An example of this from where I work at Nottingham Forest is that whoever we play against, we will always press high. At the ages where I work, from 13 to 16, we will always press high. It doesn't matter if we win, if we're winning, or if we're losing, or what sort of game it is. We will press high every time, and we will always emphasize that sort of energy and that high pressing mentality within our players. And the opposition isn't really given any value or any attention at all.
Do you think that's a mistake that coaches make in their game models, that they, even at the youth levels, they focus a bit too much and go off track a bit with their?
I think it's very, very difficult to make it concise and clear that you work on, or that this is your game model. To use an example, the first time I sat down to make a game model when I was in university, me and a good friend of mine, a game which we watched many days, and I stole some of the build-up principles of Barcelona, defending deep block principles from Atletico Madrid, high pressing from Club Dortmund, and it was just like a library of clips, a library of different principles, but none of it was mine. So I think it's very, very difficult to be as concise and sort of short as possible, so that you leave room for the players to figure things out themselves as well. It's not about us giving them the answer to every single situation that they could come in, but give them some principles, some guidelines to help them sort of overall and in the key situations.
Brilliant. Yeah, that piece on I mean, I spoke to you before we started recording and about the mentorship program that I'm working on a minute. I know a couple of people are on here who's in that program, and the kind of battle that you go through in creating a game model is detail. So I'm going to pull up the package about your game model package here, and what I love about it, and this has really helped me, is that when you're working, it almost leads you into the culture piece first. So when you're saying, okay, what behaviors, what culture am I going to be about? Is the detail then in game models connecting the dots between all these areas rather than a 400-page PowerPoint detailing every kick of the ball?
Yeah, I think we need to start in the right place, and then once we have our identity sort of sorted and we have a shared understanding of who we are, who we want to be, then everything else becomes so much easier. But what most people do, so the normal thing to do, is to start by thinking 4-3-3 or 4-4-2, and that doesn't really matter. That's just a result of something else. So if we start in the wrong end, then none of it's going to make sense for our players either. But if we start with the identity, the culture, the values, then they will be that sort of guiding help throughout the rest of the process.
The good question here from Jason. I'm a performance analyst in another sport. When evaluating each player in the profiling, how do you get away from coaches' subjectivity?
Oh, I don't think you can. I don't think you necessarily can get away from coaches' subjectivity, because 11v11 is so complex. There's no way of, there is very, very difficult objectifying performance. So you look at stuff like expected goals or expected goals per pass and stuff like this, or what do they call it, expected value of a pass. And you can use GPS to monitor some kind of performance, but these things, they don't really make sense on their own, because you need that coach knowledge, that coach competence to really give you value to the player as well. But it's all about developing that shared understanding and that shared way of working, so that we can make sure it's not, well, coach A has one way of doing it, but coach B has another, but so that we work together as a club or a group, and we all work in the same way with the same language. I took out the slide just before we started the presentation about tribal language and the sort of words that we have in our environment. And that's one thing which is really, really important, is that we have this vocabulary in our group, in our club or in our group. This word means that. We use outplaying a lot when we talk about sort of exciting offensive play. Defensively, we can talk about duels, we can talk about chasing. And then we use these words so much that we add extra value to them, but as long as we all agree on what they mean. Because especially sort of Twitter coaches, if I can say that, especially as people on social media, they will read a lot of complicated terms for different things, and no one really knows what it means. That's why I started the presentation by defining a game model, defining superiority, defining outplaying, so that from now on we agree on what it means. And when you work with coaches, especially sort of from different schools of thought, so the physios, the physical coaches, the analysts, it's important that we have that shared language and the shared understanding between us, so that we talk about the things, the same things.
I'm going to put you in the spot here on that subject of subjectivity and objectivity. And we spoke. I got to interview Raymond Verheyen next week. And the part of what he says is that to get your best 11 players on the team on the pitch at the same time increases your chance of winning. But that's something that along this question before it's always puzzled me, because is that not subjective in determining who your best 11 are? And
of course,
it is.
Yeah, of course. It's the coach's opinion on what's the best team, which players work best together. I mean, it's someone's preference, it's someone's opinion.
It's the biggest bias in football is picking your team, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And that's not a bad thing necessarily, because it's a competence, isn't it? Pep Guardiola, part of what makes Pep Guardiola really good is his ability to pick 11 players who play really well together, and in the week train them so that they are ready for the weekend where they can play really well together. But it's not an easy thing, selecting the best 11. But it's something that makes you a really good coach, or a good coach, or not so good coach.
Cool. Okay, let's get another one here. Where is it? It's jumped up on me. Not that one. Yeah, Jonas, thank you for your presentation. This is from John. How should a game model change and adapt through age groups and values and cultures? How do you recommend individual coaches develop their own game model if your club already has one?
Oh, sounded like a few questions there. To start with the first one. How should a club game model change and adapt through age groups? It depends on the club, probably. Everything that we do has to be adapted to the external factors of the club. Like if our club has elite and grassroots teams, then we can't change that necessarily. So we have to adapt. If we have limited training availability, then we have to adapt. And everything that we do, we have to base around where we are in the world, where we are in the city, what type of players we have, what type of people we're dealing with. And so in terms of values and culture, I don't think much should change at all, because if it's appropriate for us at under 12, it should be appropriate at under 18. It's all about sort of building those traits and those people who we want in our club. And that shouldn't necessarily have to change as they get older. In terms of playing style, it can change because we play 77, 99, 11v11. So obviously some things should change, but that's just a matter of your coach's preference, club preference. It's just something that should be discussed within the club and then developed so that we have a natural progression through the age groups and then end up where we want to. And then the second question in that, do you recommend individual coaches develop their own game model if your club already has one? The club has to dictate the game model because it's their players. The players will belong to the club for many, many years, whereas the coaches come and go a little bit too often. So as a coach, your job is to implement the game model of the club. This is a very common question. And if you have strong opinions which contradict the club's preferences or the club's models, then that's a discussion you need to have with the club. It's really important that we all follow the same plan and we all work together. So if my club game model, if my personal game model contradicts the club game model, then I either need to be a part of developing the club game model so that we go a little bit closer together, or I need to say, okay, I work in this club. It's their players. This is what we do. And it's a very common question, but it's quite an easy answer, because it's not about you as a coach. It's about the players and how they fit into what we want as a club.
Good one here from Robbie, because I know when you've done other work with MSC, it was based on player development and it was real heavy tactical game decision making. At the youth level, Robbie says surely the focus is about the development of the individual, whereas at the higher level, it's about winning the game. What's your view on that comment?
It's a highly complex area, isn't it? We, at all levels, we want to develop players to become better, because that will help us win games. And at all levels, the responsibility of the players is to do their best to win the game. That doesn't really change whether it's on the seventh or first team. The player's responsibility is to try to win the game. And then they will try to win the game using the tools and principles that we have taught them in training. And that's the same as coaches for youth teams. We don't need to care so much about the results. We need to care about the performance and the development and sort of the way our players apply and apply themselves. But I don't think that's very different in a first team level. I think you will have coaches, maybe not the manager, but you will have coaches at the first team level who also look at this and puts development as a priority.
You mentioned there about KPIs in your game model. Is that something that, I mean, for coaches that don't have analysis departments and that have, I mean, it's still something they can do?
I would move the responsibility over to the players. If you go back to the example that I had of the fullback, we have critical involvements offensively, defensively. They are two of the KPIs. As a coach, you can't find sort of the best case reference for all of these positions and for all of your players, because you don't have time. There's no time in the world. But what you can do, you can teach your players how to do this themselves. So if your fullback wants to develop, he comes to you and he asks, Coach, how can I get better at being a fullback? And you can say, okay, well, I will find a game online and send you a link. Watch Andy Robertson and count the amount of times he has a critical involvement in possession. Count how many times it's a success or a failure. Okay, coach. And he comes back, he says, okay, I've done this. He has this amount. Okay, now watch your own game from last week and compare the numbers. And maybe watch this under 16 fullback from our club and count his numbers. Okay, how is that different to your number? If you have 3 fullbacks, they can do that as a group exercise as well. And they can use this analytical view will hopefully give them a bit more insight of football at a higher level, whether that be national team same age or 2 years above in the club or best in the world. And it will also hopefully give them a more accurate insight into where they are. So if their numbers are better than the national team player, they will be able to say, okay, I am doing quite well. It's only a matter of time now. If I just keep doing this, I will be okay. But if they're really, really far behind, it might be an eye opener for them and something that they see and then think, okay, I have to work really, really hard now. Or, okay, maybe I'm not a fullback. I have to speak to my coach about this. So I would give the responsibility to the players. If they want to develop, they have to put the work in.
We spoke at the Leicester City conference just before, when we were having a coffee, and we're kind of chatting with David Seymour about what's next, like what's the next frontier. And alongside that, do you think, you know, like the clip of Mbappe and the ability to scan and make decisions and see and perceive, is that going to move off the pitch now, do you think, where the player has to now almost be not self-reliant but more independent, able to review games themselves, able to make decisions, able to consume some certain amounts of data about their performance?
I think so. I think we're moving in the direction of the players having to do more themselves now. I think they've been spoon-fed, at least in the top academies in the world. They've been spoon-fed with all the data, all the information for quite a long time. And we're now moving in the direction that, okay, well, the data is accessible, but you need to seek it yourself. You need to find it. You need to study it. And then if you want to, obviously we'll be here to help you. We'll be able to talk to you, discuss what you find, but it has to happen on your initiative. And I think that's a really good progression as well, because the more time a player invests in themselves, the more that will fuel the motivation and their inspiration to become better as well. So the more they invest in practicing on their own, in analyzing games, watching their role models, the more that will contribute to their drive and sort of internal motivation.
That's the thing, where could we subconsciously or indirectly be creating this technically efficient player through our academies at the minute, who all of a sudden arrives at 18 years of age, and we discover they've got no drive and the coach has been doing everything, and then they can't go any further?
Definitely. And those kind of players, they're not the ones who make it anyway. The kind of players who make it, they're the ones who do the little bit extra. They're the ones who go out of their way to get more learning opportunities. They're the ones who always manage to find some learning somewhere. And we need to help facilitate this. We need to help facilitate it through our learning interventions and how we schedule activities like this.
Yeah, more flexibility then off the pitch, more leadership structures, more
delegation, more. We have to say more often, okay, you want to be a better fullback, then these players are really good. Look at them, and then come back to me in a week and tell me what they do really good. And then I will help, and then we can discuss how you can develop these abilities. If you think Trent Alexander-Arnold is a really good fullback, okay, why? What does he do really well? Okay, he can strike the ball really well. Okay, well, how can you practice that? If you want to add that to your game, how do you practice it? And then you as the coach can help him set it up, you can help him practice it a little bit, but it has to be his initiative and it's his responsibility to get that learning and then to practice it.
Which is difficult for a coach, especially over in this culture here in the US, very difficult for a coach, because our society and this here creates ways that you don't have to do something, and it's short, solving problems or solving time. But then you're saying is that the coach is going to have to say, well, you're going to have to go and spend the time to do it. You can't shortcut this process. Yeah.
No, like from investing time in something, that inner drive is sort of developed and fueled. So if we're spoon-fed everything all the time, then we have no motivation to do it ourselves. The more we invest, the more energy and time we invest into our goals, the more likely we are to spend more energy on it as well.
Brilliant. Okay, we're at 1 hour on the button, Jonas. Fantastic. Really enjoyed that. There's been great response as well on the chat. So thanks so much for coming on. I will. You said that offer expires tonight.
Yeah, it does.
So I would highly recommend. I'm gonna get this video up and send it to the mentorship group tonight as well. So I'd highly recommend coaches to get on it. Thanks so much, Jonas, and we will get you on again very soon.
Thank you for having me on this time as well. And yeah, speak to you soon.
Top class. Thanks, Jonas. Thanks, everyone. All the best.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.